I want you to picture a map for a second.
Okay.
You've got this beautiful deep water bay right in the Florida Panhandle. And on the left side of your map, you have a historic, somewhat aristocratic village.
Right, the old town.
Exactly. St. Andrews. It's got pedigree, it's got sea baths, and the people there are very polite.
Very refined.
Yeah. Then on the right side of the map, you have this totally different vibe. A gritty, smoke-belching industrial engine. Loud, sweaty, just churning out timber.
Millville, the city of saws.
City of Sauce, right. And then in the middle between them,
Nothing.
literally nothing. Just pine trees, sand scrub, a completely dormant blank slate called Harrison.
Which, logically, I mean, it should have just stayed a blank slate.
Right. Logic says the historic town or the industrial powerhouse should become the capital of the region. But that is not what happens.
Not at all.
What happens is that a group of wealthy outsiders looked at that empty patch of sand in the middle, drew a circle around it, and decided to build a machine that would eventually just eat the other two towns alive.
Eat them alive is a strong image, but honestly, historically, it's highly accurate.
So today for our deep dive, we aren't just doing a biography of a city, we are unpacking a playbook on hostile takeovers.
Yeah.
We're looking at the birth of Panama City, Florida, and the fight for the soul of St. Andrews.
And what makes this deep dive so fascinating to me is that it's not just a timeline of bricks and mortar, it's a study of relationships.
Right, the people.
Exactly. We're looking at how this dream team of founders collaborated to build a metropolis and how that collaboration eventually turned into this massive feud.
A feud that actually required the U.S. Supreme Court to step in.
It did.
So we're pulling from diaries, legal contracts, and specifically the court records of Steele v. Drummond today.
Yeah.
But before we get into the lawsuits, we really have to understand the layout of the board.
Lay the groundwork.
Right. You mentioned St. Andrews was the old town. Give us the vibe there in the late 1800s.
Well, St. Andrews was the definition of maritime leisure. It was settled way back in 1827 by John Clark.
He was a former governor of Georgia, right?
Yes, and the town faced the water. For decades, its only real connection to the outside world was a boat.
The SS Tarpon.
Exactly, the tarpon. It brought in the mail, it brought in the tourists.
So if you lived there, you really looked out at the sea. You didn't look at the land behind you.
Precisely. It was a leisure economy, hotels, sea baths, though during the Civil War they did have a brief moment of industrial importance.
Oh, right, farming salt.
Yes, farming salt for the Confederacy, which was crucial for preserving army rations. But the Union Navy came down and burned the town to stop it.
Wow.
Yeah. So by 1900, it had basically rebuilt itself as this quiet, historic waterfront community.
Contrast that with Millville.
Oh, night and day. Night and day. Millville was founded by a French-Canadian named Henry Bovis in the 1880s. And Bovis isn't interested in sea baths.
No. He wants volume.
He's interested in volume. He builds this massive sawmill.
I think people underestimate how big these operations actually were. We aren't talking about a guy in the woods with an axe.
No, this is a full-blown industrial complex. By 1910, Millville was actually the largest community on the bay.
Bigger than Panama City.
Much bigger. It was a company town with a diverse workforce. They had these steel gangs laying track laborers in the mills. It was the economic engine of the whole area.
And there's a detail in the sources that really highlights the scale here. When Bovis eventually sells the mill, it becomes the German-American Lumber Company.
Right.
And the stock is largely held by Kaiser Wilhelm, like the German emperor.
Yes, which tells you everything you need to know about the scale.
That is insane.
It wasn't a local mom-and-pop shop. This was a strategic global asset. Bovis proved there was enough freight volume in the bay to justify huge infrastructure.
Yeah.
But he was just the engine. He wasn't the visionary.
Right. That role falls to George Mortimer West. And this is where the web of relationships really starts to spin.
Yeah.
Because West isn't a local. He's a writer, a promoter, and a railroad agent from the north.
He comes down for a vacation, effectively. He just wants a winter home in St. Andrews.
But he can't turn off his brain.
No, he has this totally restless intellect. He looks at a map of the Western Hemisphere, and he sees something everyone else missed.
The Panama Canal.
Yes. He sees the canal being built thousands of miles away. And he realizes that St. Andrews Bay is the closest deep-water port in the United States to that canal.
So he looks at that empty patch of land in the middle,
Yeah.
Harrison, and he thinks this shouldn't be a forest. This should be a global logistics hub.
Exactly. And to make sure the world understands that connection, he rebrands it. He takes the name Harrison and just throws it in the trash. He names the new town Panama City.
Which is just brilliant marketing. He's
Yeah.
basically optimizing for search terms before the internet even existed.
It really is 1900s SEO.
He's writing the coattails of the biggest construction project on Earth.
But a name on a map doesn't build a city. West has the words, but he needs the land itself.
Which brings in the third member of our Act One trio, Robert Lee Mackenzie.
Right.
Now, Mackenzie is described as the strategist, but his background is in naval stores. And we need to pause here because every time I hear naval stores, I just picture a little shop selling anchors and rope.
Hey, it is a very confusing term. It has absolutely nothing to do with retail.
Right.
Naval stores refers to the industry of extracting resin, turpentine, and pitch from pine trees. It's called naval because historically that pitch was used to waterproof wooden ships.
Okay, so he's an industrial sap farmer.
Essentially, yes. But Mackenzie was an innovator. Before him, the industry used a method called boxing, where they'd chop this massive hole in the base of the tree to catch the sap.
Which sounds terrible for the tree.
It ruined the timber and killed the trees really quickly. It was incredibly wasteful.
And Mackenzie changed that.
He introduced the turpentine cup. It was a clay or metal cup attached to the tree that collected the resin without actually destroying the wood.
It seems like a small detail, but it really shows you how his mind worked.
Exactly. He was all about efficiency and maximizing long-term value.
So how does the Turpentine King partner up with the SEO visionary?
It was this perfect symbiosis. West writes the brochures, promising a tropical utopia. Meanwhile, Mackenzie uses his local knowledge to quietly buy up the land.
Just buying the dirt itself for pennies on the dollar.
Right. And together they form the Gulf Coast Development Company.
Okay, so they have the land, they have the marketing, but they have a huge problem. They are geographically isolated.
Yes.
You can have the best deepwater port in the world, but if you can't move goods north to the rest of the country, you're just an island.
They desperately need a railroad, and this is where the relationships shift from collaborative to highly transactional.
They find a lumberman in Atlanta named A.B. Steele.
Steel is the muscle in this equation. He's the bridge. He wants to move timber from the interior down to the coast.
So Mackenzie negotiates a defining deal here.
A massive deal. He says, we will give you a huge ownership stake in our development company if and only if you bring your railroad all the way to our new town.
To Panama City.
Yes. And this is the pivot point of the entire history. By bringing the rail to Panama City, to the new town, they are physically bypassing St. Andrews.
The tracks go to the empty land in the middle, not the historic town on the edge.
Exactly. So Steele starts building, but he hits a wall almost immediately. The Wiregrass region.
Right, it's rugged, swampy, incredibly difficult terrain. He runs out of money.
The project is just dead in the water. Banks won't touch him. So Steele goes back to Atlanta, hat in hand, to see a man named Asa Candler.
The Coca-Cola tycoon.
The very same.
Now you have to ask yourself, why does a guy selling soda in Atlanta care about a half-built railroad in the Florida Panhandle? I mean, I assume he wants to sell Coke to the tourists.
How that's the small game. Candler was obsessed with something called monumentalism.
Monumentalism.
Yeah, he believed that true wealth wasn't just numbers in a bank account, it was physical infrastructure. Concrete steel tracks. He wanted to build things that would outlast him.
So this wasn't just a standard investment, it was an ego project.
It was absolute legacy building.
Yeah.
He writes the check not because the profit margins look perfect, but because he wanted to be the man who opened up the Gulf.
That is wild. So in a weird way, the reason Panama City exists today is because of Atlanta's soda money.
Pretty much. The Atlanta and St. Andrews Bay Railroad, the Bay Line, finally arrives in Panama City in 1908.
Champagnes are popping, land values are spiking in the new town. But if you are J.H. Drummond over in historic St. Andrews watching the smoke rise from the new depot across the bay, what are you thinking?
You're thinking you're in serious trouble. You realize that being a charming waterfront village is nice, but without a rail connection, you are commercially dead.
The center of gravity is totally shifted away from you.
Exactly.
Which leads us to Act 3, and honestly, probably the most tragic figure in this story, J.H. Drummond.
Drummond is the man who tries to buy parity. He's a banker, a mayor, a timberman in St. Andrews, and he just refuses to let his town fade into obsolescence.
So in 1914, he sits down with A.B. Steele and signs a contract. And this isn't a handshake deal. This is a bet the farm situation.
It is a totally hard-nosed bargain. Drummond agrees to pay for everything personally.
Out of his own pocket.
Out of his own pocket. He pays for the grading of the land, the wooden ties the right-of-way. He builds a spur line, a branch off the main track, to connect St. Andrews to the network.
Wait, He pays to build the railroad's own track for them?
Yes, he does. And in exchange, the contract says Steele agrees to provide St. Andrews with the exact same service as that had by Panama City.
Equality, that's what he was buying.
He was buying survival. And for a few years, it actually works. The spur opens in 1915.
Okay.
St. Andrews gets a depot. They get a Y to turn the trains around tracks, running right down to the fish houses. It really looks like they've saved their future.
But there's a physics problem here, isn't there?
Yeah.
A spur is not a main line.
Exactly. Think of the main line as the main artery. The blood has to flow through it. A spur is just a capillary. It's optional. If the artery flows, the capillary can still dry up if the pressure drops.
Oh, and the pressure dropped.
The economics shifted. Steele sells the railroad, and the new owners look at the books. They see this little spur into St. Andrews isn't making enough profit. So around 1921, they just stopped the trains.
Drummond must have been furious. He literally paid for those tracks.
Sued Steele v. Drummond. It went all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court.
Wow.
And here is the kicker. The court upheld the contract legally. They said, yes, you have a valid contract. But the economic reality was that the spur was dead. You cannot force a railroad to run a train that loses money indefinitely.
So he won the legal argument, but completely lost the war.
Precisely. The tracks were physically there, but the engines just stopped coming. That moment cemented the hierarchy forever.
Panama City was the main line?
And St. Andrews was just a branch, and branches can be cut off.
So we move from this pioneer era, which was all about vision and risk, into the 1920s. And the tone changes completely. The romantic visionaries are basically pushed aside, and the corporate sharks enter the water.
This is the era of consolidation. We meet two new titans. First, Minor C. Keith.
Right.
He's the magnate behind United Fruit Company. He buys the railroad and the mill. He injects what the locals called the Keith Millions.
And his partner on the ground is Walter C. Sherman.
Sherman is the embodiment of industrial efficiency. He isn't a founder, he's an operator. He consolidates the mills, the hotels, the power company. He wants centralized control of the entire bay.
And this drive for centralization puts him on a direct collision course with our original visionary George West and his wife Lillian West.
The Wests represented the resident view. They believed in local independence, civic virtue, and the identity of the separate towns.
Whereas Sherman represented the corporate view, efficiency above all else.
Right.
This feud gets incredibly petty, but also incredibly serious. We really have to talk about the gravel car scandal.
It sounds boring, but it was straight-up theft. The county had purchased gravel specifically to fix the public roads in St. Andrews.
Okay.
Sherman's associates at the railroad took those rail cars filled with public property and diverted them to pave the private roads on Keith's estates and the golf course.
They literally stole the road from under the town.
They did. And George West, who owns the St. Andrews Bay News, exposes this. He blasts them on the front page.
I imagine Sherman doesn't take that lying down.
No. Sherman tries to run the Wests out of town. He circulates a petition calling their newspaper inimical, which basically means an enemy to the county. He wants to shut them down completely.
And this is where Lillian West steps into the spotlight. She's effectively running the paper by this point. What does she do with this petition?
She pulls an absolute masterstroke. She publishes the petition in her own paper. She puts the names of everyone who signed it right on the front page.
That is such a power move. Just saying, I'm not going anywhere and I want everyone to know exactly who is trying to silence us.
It was incredibly defiant. She also famously declared that she and Sherman wouldn't eat potatoes out of the same dish.
I love that line so much. I won't even share a starch with you.
It's a great quote. But despite the defiance, the walls are closing in. It's 1925, 1926. The Florida land boom is happening.
Right. Investors are flooding in.
And they want a unified front. The business elites, like Sherman Mackenzie, the railroad guys, they decide that having three separate towns, Panama City, St. Andrews, and Millville, is just inefficient.
They want to merge them all together.
They want annexation, a hostile takeover.
And Lillian West fights this tooth and nail. She argues it will destroy the very soul of St. Andrews.
She sees it as the final surrender. If you lose your municipal government, you lose your identity. But the political machine was just too strong. The railroad money was too loud. The annexation passes.
And George West, the man who started this whole journey, writes a final editorial.
He titles it Hail Caesar. As in, Hail Caesar, those who are about to die salute you.
The irony there is just crushing. George West is the man who invented Panama City. He named it. He promoted it. He brought the railroad that made it possible, and now that very city is legally swallowing the home he loved.
He built the machine that ate his village. He engineered his own obsolescence.
But, and I think this is really important, St. Andrews didn't disappear. It didn't just become another generic neighborhood. And that seems largely due to Lillian.
After George dies, Lillian doesn't pack up. She doubles down. She creates what I call a cultural firewall.
A cultural firewall. I like that.
Even though St. Andrews lost its government, she used the Panama City Publishing Company to preserve its identity.
She keeps publishing the paper.
She keeps publishing. She registers as the first female voter in St. Andrews. She champions local history. She ensures that St. Andrews remains the village inside the city. She basically said, you can take our mayor, but you cannot take our vibe.
It's interesting to look at the trade-off here. I mean, we can sit here and be nostalgic about independent St. Andrews, but was the consolidation, the annexation, ultimately the right move?
Well, if you look at the economics, yes. The ruthless consolidation absolutely worked. Because Panama City became a unified municipality with a deep port and rail access, they were able to land massive projects later on.
Right.
International paper came in 1931. The Wainwright Shipyard came during World War II.
And those projects defined the region for the next 50 years.
Right. You just don't get a massive shipyard or a global paper mill and a fragmented collection of bickering villages. You need the scale that Sherman and Mackenzie fought for.
So if we zoom out and look at the whole board, the titans, like Steele, Sherman, Keith, they built the body of the city. They built the economy.
But the resistors, Drummond George and Lillian West, they saved the character. They saved the soul.
It explains why if you go there today, St. Andrews feels different. It's walkable. It's got the marina. It feels older.
It feels completely distinct. And that is directly traceable to Lillian West refusing to let that identity be paved over. She kept the resident view alive in print even when the political battle was lost.
There's a visual that wraps this up perfectly for me. You can go to St. Andrews today and you see the Panama City Publishing Museum. It's the actual building George and Lillian built.
It's a survivor. It stands there surrounded by the modern city, but it's still holding its ground. It's a testament to the fact that while steel and ambition can build a metropolis, it takes people, stubborn, vocal potato refusing people, to make it a community.
So next time you're driving through a city that feels like a mix of different eras and vibes, ask yourself something. Who built the railroad and who refused to get on the train? Think about that for a while.
That really is the ultimate question, isn't it?
Thanks for diving deep with us.
Always a pleasure.